unaware that I was the real CEO of the company, whose name was etched into the chandelier above their heads. My husband's mother pointed one steady finger at my pregnant body and told security to remove me. The guards didn't hesitate. They gripped my arms, one on each side, and dragged me across the marble floor of the grand lobby while 300 guests, investors, journalists, and every executive on payroll watched in silence. My swollen belly pressed against the cold evening air as they kicked me outside like I was trespassing in a building I legally owned. My husband stood 6 feet away. He didn't move. He didn't speak. He adjusted his cufflink and looked away. But his mother, the woman who had just humiliated me in front of everyone, had no idea that the pregnant woman now standing alone on that sidewalk held the one document that controlled every asset, every account, every contract, and every property attached to her name. She didn't know that one phone call from me, just one, could leave her homeless before sunrise. But here's what no one in that room understood. Why had I hidden my position as the real CEO for 3 years? What had my husband's mother done that made her so confident she could have guards kick a pregnant woman outside without consequence? Who was waiting on the other end of that one phone call? And when the truth finally surfaced in front of everyone, why was my husband's mother shaking so violently that she couldn't stand? If you believe a woman's silence should never be mistaken for weakness, stay with this story until the very end. Before we begin, tell me where you're watching from and your local time. I read every single comment. And if you believe in quiet strength and real justice, consider subscribing. My name is Nadia. 3 years ago, I married Michael Hale in a garden ceremony overlooking the Hudson River. His mother, Judith, picked the venue, the flowers, the guest list, and the photographer. She picked the font on the invitations. She nearly picked my dress. I let her, not because I was weak, because I was watching. See, my father was Dr. Elliot Mercer. If that name doesn't mean anything to you, walk through downtown Manhattan and count the buildings. Mercer Hale Communications. The streaming platform you probably used last night. The talent agency behind half the faces on television. The film production company that greenlit 3 Oscar nominees in a single year. My father built all of it. And 6 months before he died, wasting away from ALS in a hospital room that smelled like antiseptic and goodbye, he called his attorney to his bedside and restructured everything. He placed his controlling shares, 51% of Mercer Hale Communications, inside a private LLC called Meridian Holding Group. He named me as sole managing member. Then he filed an amended operating agreement with the state that said something very simple. The managing member of Meridian is the chief executive officer of Mercer Hale Communications, not the board, not whoever held the public title. Me. The filing was public record. It sat in a government database that anyone could search. But here's the thing about powerful people. They never check. They assume power belongs to them because it always has. My father died on a Tuesday. I held his hand until it went cold. The last thing he ever wrote to me was a letter tucked inside the LLC documents, one sentence in his handwriting at the bottom. Let them show you who they are before you show them what you hold. So that's what I did. I married Michael believing something soft still lived inside him. When we met, he was teaching a part-time business class at Columbia while finishing his MBA. He wasn't rich yet. He wasn't cruel yet. He smiled at me after a lecture on corporate ethics, and the smile felt honest. He asked me to coffee, and for 2 hours he listened like my words were the most important sounds in the room. I thought I had found someone who saw me before he saw my last name. But Judith Hale saw something different the moment we were introduced. She looked me up and down in her living room, pearls resting against her collarbone, and said, "Michael tells me you're studying on scholarship. How resourceful." That word, resourceful. She used it the way people use interesting. When they mean beneath me, I smiled. I said thank you, and I wrote it down later in a leather notebook I kept in my nightstand. That notebook became my witness. Every insult Judith delivered with a smile, every meeting I was removed from without explanation, every time Michael repeated his mother's words back to me like they were his own ideas. I recorded dates, exact phrases, patterns, not because I was planning revenge, because my father taught me that documentation is the difference between a feeling and a fact. For 3 years, I played the role Judith assigned me, the quiet wife, the woman with no connections. I wore simple dresses. I carried a handbag from a department store. I couponed at the grocery store, even though the trust fund my father left me generated more in daily interest than Michael earned in a month. Judith had my biography removed from the company website. She replaced it with one line. Nadia Hale supports the Mercer Hale Foundation's charitable initiatives. She erased me in plain sight, and I let her, because every time she pushed me further into the margins, she moved further from the truth, and the truth was patient. Michael changed slowly, the way good fruit spoils, not all at once, but from the center outward. He started repeating Judith's phrases. "It's just optics, Nadia. Mum thinks it's cleaner if I handle this alone. You don't need to be in that meeting." He reported my moods, my opinions, my private thoughts back to his mother, and called it keeping the peace. He didn't see it as betrayal. He saw it as management, and that was worse. Because a man who betrays you knowingly can be confronted, but a man who dismantles you while believing he's being kind, that man will never understand what he destroyed. Then I got pregnant. 5 months ago, I saw my baby's heartbeat on a screen in a dark ultrasound room, and something inside me shifted. Not anger, clarity. I was not going to raise a child in a house where its mother was invisible. I was not going to let my son or daughter grow up watching Judith Hale treat me like furniture and assume that's what love looks like. But I needed to be sure, so I waited. I gave Michael one more chance, then another. I watched for any sign that fatherhood might wake something in him. Instead, what I got was this. 6 weeks before the gala, I had a bleeding scare. 14 weeks pregnant, alone in the apartment, blood on the bathroom floor. The ambulance took me to Mount Sinai. Michael was at a board dinner. He arrived 2 hours later, and while I was still connected to the fetal monitor, my heart pounding, my hands shaking, he answered his mother's phone call. He stepped into the hallway, and through the crack in the door, I heard him say, "She's fine, Mom. It's not serious. We'll still make the Hong Kong call tomorrow." He came back. He held my hand. He had no idea I had heard every word. That night, lying in that hospital bed with my baby's heartbeat beeping beside me, I made my decision. I would attend the Legacy Gala. I would stand in that building one final time as the invisible wife, and then I would stop being invisible. The morning of the gala, I sat alone at the kitchen table in the penthouse Judith didn't know was owned by a Mercer Hale subsidiary. Winter light came through the windows. The city moved far below. I opened my notebook and read 3 years of entries, 3 years of timestamps, 3 years of evidence. Then I closed it and placed my hand on my belly. My baby kicked. Twice. I whispered, "Almost time." But what I didn't know yet, what no one could have warned me about, was that Judith Hale had a plan of her own for that evening, and it was worse than anything she had done in 3 years. She wasn't just going to humiliate me at the gala. She was going to try to destroy me permanently. And the reason? She had discovered something that morning, that made her dangerous in a way she had never been before. What did Judith find out? What was her plan? And why would it be the biggest mistake she ever made? That morning, while I was reviewing my notebook at the kitchen table, Judith Hale was sitting in her corner office on the 42nd floor doing something she never did, reading compliance documents, not because she suddenly cared about governance, because someone had forced her hand. Her name was Rebecca Lawson, General Counsel, the only attorney in the building who answered to the company's legal structure instead of Judith's ego. Rebecca had spent 3 weeks quietly tracing a payment that didn't sit right. $2.6 million routed through a vendor called Harrington Event Group. The description on the invoice said, strategic brand consulting and philanthropic integration. But when Rebecca searched public records, Harrington Event Group had no history of consulting work. Its registered address traced to a suite 3 floors below a private investment firm that had managed Judith's personal money for over a decade. Rebecca didn't panic. She didn't confront Judith. She sent me an email, subject line, governance threshold clarification. The language was careful, professional, measured, but I understood exactly what she was telling me. Judith had moved company money into her own pocket and skipped every approval process required to do it. I read that email twice. Then I logged into the secure governance archive tied to Meridian Holding Group, the LLC my father created. I pulled up the expenditure authorization matrix. Any payment exceeding $2 million required either a full board vote or trustee ratification. Judith's payment exceeded that threshold by $600,000. No board vote had been recorded. No trustee ratification appeared in the system. Because Judith didn't know a trustee existed. She didn't know the LLC existed. She thought she was untouchable. I saved Rebecca's email to a secure folder. I noted the timestamp, and I closed my laptop. But here's what I didn't know. Rebecca had also sent a second copy of that email to the company's external audit firm as a precaution. And somehow, through a chain of assistants and whispered conversations, word reached Judith that someone inside legal was asking questions about Harrington. Judith didn't know the details. She didn't know Rebecca had contacted me, but she knew that if anyone pulled that thread, it would unravel everything. And the only person outside the Hale family who might have the standing to demand an investigation was the quiet, pregnant woman she'd been trying to erase for 3 years, me. That's why the gala became urgent for Judith. Not celebration, containment. She needed to remove me from the company's orbit completely and publicly. She needed every investor, every board member, every journalist in that room to see me dismissed, humiliated, reduced to nothing, so that if my name ever surfaced in connection with a governance question, people would remember the pregnant woman who was escorted out, not a CEO, not an authority, a disruption. Judith called Michael into her office at 4 that afternoon. I know this because Michael told me later, after everything collapsed, when he was desperate enough to confess things he thought might save him. She sat him down and said, Nadia has been asking questions she has no business asking. She's becoming a liability. Tonight, I need you to trust me. Whatever happens at the gala, do not intervene. Do not defend her. This is for the family. Michael asked what kind of questions. Judith said, the kind that could embarrass us if she goes to the wrong people. Michael asked if Nadia had done something wrong. Judith said, she doesn't need to do something wrong to be dangerous. She just needs to talk to the wrong person at the wrong time. And Michael, my husband, the father of my child, the man who once listened to me for 2 hours over coffee like my words mattered, nodded. He didn't ask a single follow-up question. He didn't call me. He didn't warn me. He adjusted his cufflinks and said, I trust you, Mom. I arrived at the gala alone. The car dropped me at the entrance, and I stood for a moment looking up at the building. My father's name was carved into the stone above the door. Mercer. Right there, in letters 2 feet tall. I touched my belly and walked inside. The lobby was transformed. Crystal everywhere. A string quartet playing something soft and expensive beneath the chandelier engraved with the company's founding year. 300 guests in evening wear. Champagne flutes catching light, laughter bouncing off marble, cameras positioned at every angle. This was Judith's production. Every flower arrangement, every lighting choice, every name on the seating chart had passed through her hands. She had built this room to worship continuity. Her continuity. I wore a pale blue gown, simple, elegant, the kind of dress that doesn't demand attention, but doesn't apologize for existing either. I carried a small clutch. Inside it, my leather notebook and my phone, nothing else. I didn't need anything else. I saw Michael first. He was near the stage reviewing note cards, rehearsing the speech he believed would cement his legacy as the visionary CEO of Mercer Hale Communications. He was not the CEO. He had never been the CEO. The title on his business card was a decoration Judith had arranged. The real authority had been sitting across from him at the breakfast table every morning for 3 years, eating toast and saying nothing. He saw me and smiled, but the smile was wrong. It was tight, managed. The smile of a man who already knew something unpleasant was coming and had chosen not to stop it. "You look nice," he said. "Not beautiful, not stunning. Nice. The word you use for wallpaper." "Thank you," I said. "Your speech will go well." He nodded, already looking past me at someone more important. That was Michael in a single gesture, always looking past me. I found a quiet spot near a pillar and watched the room fill. I saw Judith making her entrance, silver hair sculpted, emerald earrings catching every camera flash. She moved through the crowd like she owned the air. Donors leaned toward her. Board members deferred to her. She touched arms, whispered names, laughed at precisely timed intervals. She was performing power, and every person in that room believed the performance. Then her eyes found me, and something changed in her face. Not anger, something colder. Resolve. She whispered to Tom Bradley, the head of building security, and I watched him nod once and speak into his earpiece. She whispered to her assistant, who crossed the room and spoke to 2 men I didn't recognize near the east entrance. Judith was positioning pieces on a board, and I was the piece she wanted removed. The next 40 minutes passed in slow motion. Judith gave her opening remarks from the stage. She spoke about legacy, about strength, about the Hale family's commitment to excellence. She did not mention my father's name. She did not mention Mercer. She mentioned Hale 7 times. I counted. Michael gave his speech next. Growth projections, expansion into streaming, new talent acquisitions. He was confident, articulate, commanding, and every strategic initiative he described required capital authorization that, under the LLC operating agreement, only I could approve. He didn't know that. He thought the applause was for his vision. It was actually for mine. When the speeches ended and the room settled into cocktail conversation, Judith made her move. She crossed the floor directly toward me, and the crowd parted for her the way it always did. Tom Bradley followed 3 steps behind. 2 additional security guards appeared from the east corridor. She stopped in front of me, close enough that I could smell her perfume, something French and expensive. Something designed to remind you she existed in spaces you couldn't afford. "Nadia," she said, not warmly, not coldly, clinically, like a doctor, naming a diagnosis. "Judith," I replied. I think it's best if you leave the event early tonight. You look tired. The pregnancy must be exhausting. She said it loud enough for nearby guests to hear, framing it as concern, wrapping the knife in silk before pushing it in. I'm fine, I said. I'd like to stay. Her eyes hardened. The silk fell away. This isn't a request. I looked at her, and for the first time in 3 years, I let her see something real in my face. Not anger, not fear, recognition. I saw exactly what she was doing, and she saw that I saw. That terrified her more than anything. She snapped her fingers, literally snapped them like calling a dog. Tom Bradley stepped forward. 2 guards flanked me on either side. Mrs. Hale needs to leave, Judith said. Her voice projected now, loud enough for the nearest cluster of investors to turn their heads. She's not feeling well. Please assist her to the exit. The guards gripped my arms, one on each side, their fingers pressed into my skin hard enough to leave marks I would photograph later at the hospital. I felt my baby shift inside me, a sharp movement, a protest against the sudden pressure and the flood of adrenaline pouring through my body. Judith, I said quietly, I am 5 months pregnant, which is exactly why you should be home resting, she replied, straightening her emerald earrings. Not making a scene. I was not making a scene. She was. But that was the genius of Judith Hale. She created the chaos and then pointed at someone else as the source. The guards pulled me forward. My heels scraped against the marble floor. The sound cut through the chamber music like a knife across glass. Heads turned. Conversations stopped. 300 people watched a pregnant woman being dragged through the center of a gala by 2 men in black suits, and not one person moved. I looked for Michael. He was standing near the stage, champagne glass frozen halfway to his lips. Our eyes met. I searched his face for something, anything. A flinch of conscience, a crack in the performance, but Michael Hale looked at his pregnant wife being hauled across the floor of her own family's building, and he looked away. He looked away. The lobby doors opened. Cold air hit my face. The guards released my arms at the top of the steps, and I steadied myself against the railing. My hands were shaking. My abdomen tightened, and for one terrible moment, I felt a cramp that sent ice through my entire body. I pressed both hands against my belly and breathed. In, out, in, out. My baby's movement slowed, then steadied. Behind me, through the glass doors, I could see Judith returning to the party, smiling, accepting a champagne flute, touching a donor's arm. It was already over for her. I was already forgotten. But I was still standing. I opened my clutch. I took out my phone, not the cheap one Michael had seen me carry for 3 years. The other one. The one that connected to a contact list, with names that could rearrange boardrooms and collapse companies and rewrite headlines overnight. I pressed one name. It rang twice. A voice answered. Nadia, it's late. Is everything all right? No, Mr. Ashford, I said. It's not. I need you to open the Meridian file. Silence on the other end. Then, all of it? All of it. Effective tonight. Board notification by morning. And Gerald. Yes? Start with the property records. I want Judith Hale to wake up tomorrow with no place to live. I ended the call. The city noise filled the silence. Taxis passed. A doorman at the building across the street glanced at me and looked away. I was just a pregnant woman standing on a sidewalk in a blue gown, alone in the cold. Nobody knew what I had just set in motion. Nobody understood that in the span of 43 seconds, I had activated a legal mechanism that would dismantle Judith Hale's entire world. But the call was just the beginning. Because what Gerald Ashford found when he opened the Meridian file that night was far worse than a wrongful removal from a gala. It was worse than 3 years of emotional abuse. It was worse than anything I had imagined. What had Judith been hiding inside the company's financial records? How deep did the Harrington payments actually go? And when Michael finally learned the truth about who his wife really was, what did he do that shocked even his own mother? Gerald Ashford had been my father's attorney for 26 years. He was the man who drafted the Meridian Holding Group documents. He was the man who sat beside my father's hospital bed and witnessed his signature on the LLC transfer. He was the man who looked me in the eye at my father's funeral and said, "When you're ready, Nadia." Not before. For 3 years, Gerald had waited, quietly, patiently, holding a file that contained the legal architecture to reshape an entire corporation in a single night. And when my call came, he didn't ask why. He didn't ask if I was sure. He heard my voice, steady and clear on that cold sidewalk. And he understood. The waiting was over. By midnight, while Judith Hale sipped champagne and accepted compliments on a magnificent gala, Gerald's team had already begun. 3 attorneys working from a secure office in Midtown. The first action was formal notification to the Mercer Hale Communications Board of Directors, a letter sent via encrypted email to every board member's personal address, stating that pursuant to the amended operating agreement of Meridian Holding Group, Nadia Mercer, sole managing member, was exercising her authority as the de facto chief executive officer of Mercer Hale Communications. The letter cited the specific clause. It cited the filing date. It cited the public record number. It was airtight. My father had made sure of that. The second action was a demand for an emergency forensic audit of all expenditures, authorized solely by Judith Hale within the past 18 months. Gerald's letter referenced the Harrington Event Group payments by name, by amount, and by date. It referenced the missing board vote. It referenced the absence of trustee ratification. And it formally requested that outside auditors be granted access to every financial record Judith had touched. The third action was the one I had asked for specifically. Property records. Gerald's team pulled the ownership chain on the penthouse where Judith lived. The deed traced back through 2 holding companies, both of which were subsidiaries of Mercer Hale Communications. Judith Hale did not own her home. She occupied it through a corporate housing arrangement that had never been formally approved by the managing member of Meridian, which meant I had the authority to terminate that arrangement, effective immediately. I didn't go home that night. I went to the hospital. The cramping hadn't stopped, and by the time the car arrived, I was gripping the door handle with white knuckles, breathing through my teeth. The emergency room doctor examined me, ran tests, and told me what I already feared: elevated blood pressure, early signs of preeclampsia, stress-induced. They admitted me for observation. A nurse strapped a fetal monitor across my belly, and I lay there in a hospital gown, still wearing the pale blue heels from the gala, listening to my baby's heartbeat fill the room. That sound, that steady, rapid rhythm, it was the only thing that mattered. At 2 a.m, my phone buzzed. A text from Gerald. Board notified. 3 members have already responded requesting emergency session. Audit team engaged. Property termination notice drafted and ready for your signature. I signed it digitally from my hospital bed. My hand was steady. At 6 a.m, while the sun was still a suggestion behind the Manhattan skyline, a courier delivered a legal notice to the front desk of Judith Hale's penthouse building. The notice informed her that her residential occupancy was terminated under Section 14.3 of the Corporate Housing Policy, effective within 72 hours. The notice bore my name. Not Nadia Hale, Nadia Mercer, managing member, Meridian Holding Group, Chief Executive Officer, Mercer Hale Communications. Judith received it while still in her bathrobe. Her coffee went cold on the counter. Her hands trembled so badly she had to set the paper down and read it flat against the marble. I know. This because the building's concierge told Gerald, and Gerald told me. She read it 4 times. Then she called Michael. Michael called me at 7:15. I was still in the hospital. The fetal monitor was still beeping. His voice sounded like a man who had stepped off solid ground and discovered nothing beneath his feet. Nadia, what is this? What's happening? Mum just got some kind of eviction notice with your name on it. She says it's from the company. She's hysterical. What did you do? I let the silence hold for 3 full seconds before I answered. What did I do, Michael? Or what did I finally stop allowing? I don't understand. I know. That's been the problem for 3 years. He started talking faster, the way people do when they feel control slipping through their fingers like water. He mentioned the gala. He mentioned his speech. He mentioned his mother's intentions being misunderstood. He said the word overreaction twice. He said, let's not blow this out of I'm proportion. He said, I'm sure we can fix this. Michael, I said, and something in my voice made him stop. I am lying in a hospital bed right now because your mother had security guards drag me across a marble floor while I was 5 months pregnant. I am being monitored for preeclampsia. Our baby, your baby, is being watched on a screen right now because the stress of what your family did to me last night could have ended this pregnancy. So when you ask me what I did, I need you to understand something very clearly. I didn't do anything. I simply stopped pretending. The line went quiet. I could hear him breathing. I could hear the fetal monitor, 2 heartbeats in the room, and Michael was miles away, trying to process a world that no longer arranged itself around his comfort. Your mother has 72 hours to vacate the penthouse, I continued. The board has been notified of my legal authority as CEO. An audit has been initiated into the Harrington Event Group payments, which I suspect will reveal that your mother has been funneling company funds into her personal network for over a year. And your title, Michael, the CEO title you practiced speeches for and printed on business cards and introduced yourself with at every dinner party, it was never real. It was never approved by the only entity with the authority to grant it. That entity is me. He didn't respond for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice had changed. The confidence was gone. The charm was gone. What remained was something small and bewildered, like a child who had just learned the rules of a game he thought he had been winning. Nadia, I didn't know. I know you didn't know, Michael. That's not your crime. Your crime is that you never bothered to look, not at the governance documents, not at your mother's finances, not at me. You never once looked at me and wondered if there was more than what you were told to see. You just accepted the version of me that was convenient. The quiet wife, the woman with no connections, the burden your mother said I was. You chose that version because it made you feel powerful, and now you have to live with what that choice cost you. I ended the call. The nurse came in to check my blood pressure. It was still elevated, but the baby was stable. Strong heartbeat, consistent rhythm. My child was fighting, just like me. By noon the next day, the board held its emergency session. Gerald presented the Meridian Holding Group documents. He walked 7 board members through the operating agreement, the LLC filing, the chain of authority. He showed them the public record that had been sitting in a government database for over 3 years. He watched their faces cycle through confusion, disbelief, and something that looked like embarrassment. They had never checked. None of them had ever verified who actually held controlling authority. They had simply assumed it was whoever Judith told them it was. The board voted unanimously to recognize my authority. Michael's CEO title was formally dissolved. Judith's seat on the advisory committee was revoked, and the forensic audit of Harrington Event Group was expanded to cover every financial transaction Judith had personally authorized in the past 24 months. What the auditors found was worse than I expected. Harrington was not one payment, it was a pattern. Over 19 months, Judith had routed $3.8 million through 4 different shell vendors, all connected to her personal financial network. The money had funded private travel, a renovation on a vacation property in the Hamptons that she claimed was a corporate retreat facility, and direct payments to a PR firm managing her personal reputation. She had been stealing from the company my father built and spending it on maintaining the illusion that she was important. Gerald filed a formal complaint with the board. The board referred the matter to external counsel for potential civil and criminal liability review. Judith Hale, the woman who had snapped her fingers at security guards to remove a pregnant woman from a building, was now facing the possibility of prosecution. On the 3rd day, the 72 hours expired. Judith did not leave the penthouse voluntarily. Building management, acting on the lawful termination notice, changed the access codes. Her keycard stopped working at 9 in the morning. She called Michael in a panic. Michael called Gerald. Gerald told him the decision was final and lawful. Judith Hale stood in the lobby of a building she had walked through like a queen for 15 years, and for the first time, the doors did not open for her. She had nowhere to go. The Hamptons property was under corporate review. Her personal accounts were frozen pending the audit. The friends she had cultivated for decades, the donors, the socialites, the board wives, every single one of them had already heard the news. Judith Hale was not a powerful woman who had been wronged. She was a woman who had been caught. And in the world she had built for herself, being caught was the same as being dead. Michael came to the hospital that afternoon. He sat in the chair beside my bed and looked at the fetal monitor like he was seeing it for the first time. He didn't speak for a long time. When he did, his voice was barely above a whisper. "Did you ever love me?" I looked at him, really looked at him, and I told him the truth. I loved the man who listened to me for 2 hours over coffee and made me believe kindness was more important to him than status. I loved the man who proposed with a ring he saved 4 months to buy. But that man hasn't existed for a long time, Michael. And I don't think he disappeared. I think he was just a version of you that showed up when you had nothing to gain from being someone else. He cried. For the first time in our marriage, I watched Michael Hale cry without performing it for anyone. No audience, no camera. Just a man sitting in a hospital room realizing that he had traded something real for something hollow, and the transaction was final. I didn't comfort him. That wasn't cruelty. It was clarity. I had spent 3 years comforting a man who never once comforted me when it cost him anything. I was done. My attorney filed for divorce the following week. The custody arrangement was structured to protect my child. Michael was granted supervised visitation pending a psychological evaluation. Judith was barred from contact with the child entirely, given the ongoing financial investigation and the documented physical aggression at the gala. The doorbell camera footage from the gala entrance, which captured every second of my removal, was entered into the legal record. 2 months later, I sat in the corner office on the 42nd floor of Mercer Hale Communications, the same office Judith had once used to plot my erasure. I had changed nothing about the room except one detail. Entard's the desk. Beside my laptop and a fresh leather notebook, I placed a framed photograph of my father. Beside it, I placed his letter. The one sentence at the bottom written in his handwriting, now visible to anyone who sat across from me. Let them show you who they are before you show them what you hold. The city moved below the windows. Phones rang. The company operated. The streaming platform hit a new subscriber milestone. The talent agency signed 3 new clients. Life continued because that is what structure allows. Not spectacle, not revenge, continuity built on truth. I placed my hand on my belly. 8 months now. Strong heartbeat. The doctor said everything looked good. My blood pressure had stabilized. The preeclampsia risk had decreased. My baby was almost here. I whispered to my child the same thing my father whispered to me the last time I saw him alive. You are already enough. Remember that when the world tries to tell you otherwise. The phone on my desk rang. My assistant's voice came through. Ms. Mercer, the board is ready for you. I stood. I smoothed my dress. I picked up my notebook, and I walked into the boardroom of the company my father built, carrying his grandchild and his legacy in the same body. And for the first time in 3 years, every single person in that room stood when I entered. Not because I demanded it, because they finally understood who I was. And Judith? The last I heard, she was renting a 1-bedroom apartment in New Jersey, alone, with no camera flashes, no champagne flutes, no emerald earrings catching the light. The woman who had kicked a pregnant woman out of a building to protect her empire discovered that she never had an empire. She had a daughter-in-law's patience, and patience, when it runs out, doesn't explode. It restructures. Tell me something. Have you ever stayed silent, not because you were weak, but because you were waiting for the right moment to speak? Have you ever let someone underestimate you because you knew the truth would eventually do what no argument could? Drop your answer in the comments. Tell me where you're watching from right now and your local time. I read every single comment, and your story matters to me as much as Nadia's. If this story touched something real inside you, if you felt it in your chest when Michael looked away, if you held your breath when Judith snapped her fingers, if you exhaled when Nadia made that one phone call, then do me a favor. Subscribe to this channel and tap that notification bell so you never miss a story like this. Because we are building something here, a community that believes quiet strength is real strength. And the next story, it's even more powerful than this one. I'll see you there.